should cities be allowed to be sanctuary cities?
Yes.
Now, I happen to be and understand a little about China and lived in China and speak Chinese. I'm pretty friendly with China. You know, you see those maps, red and blue, and there's all that red across there, and Democrats go into depression over it. It's mostly rocks and cows that are in that red area.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Hold the First Amendment.
When it comes to running mates on a presidential ticket, the common thought is that the choice is irrelevant and it doesn't really make too much of a difference either way. For the most part, I would agree with those statements, but what the selection does is it gives you a barometer to measure the current state of the party and the potential future going forward. In addition to that barometer, they are also potentially second in line to the presidency, plus whoever is vice president will almost assuredly run for president when the term or terms are over. With that in mind, it's worth looking into who the running mates are and what positions they have supported or comments they have made in the past. In the case of the Democrats, they just finished forcing Joe Biden to drop out of the race to give room for their diversity hire that would have never won an actual primary race. And remember, the Biden-Harris ticket was going to save democracy, which I believe would be described as
the hypocrisy abounds.
With the coup complete, Harris selected Minnesota Governor Tim Walz to join forces on what is probably the most left-leaning ticket Democrats have produced in a very long time. On the Republican side, after getting shot by the lone gunman in Pennsylvania, Donald Trump selected Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, someone who previously described himself as a never-Trumper.
I'm a never-Trump guy. I never liked him.
So to sum it up, we have a socialist teaming up with a woman who stole the candidacy, and we have a former never-Trumper joining Donald Trump. Sounds like it's 2024. First thing to note about Tim Walz is that he is a liar. I don't mean your typical political spin or narrative tales, I mean he is a full-on leftist propagandist for the party.
I'll take Joe Biden at 100 over any of these guys, or whatever age they're at. I've spent a lot of time with the president, and he's great. We're talking, we're chatting and all this, and I think, we all get a little older. That's what happens, but you also gain that insight, and I think when it comes to these issues, working across the aisle to get things done, you see the president just doing this with dignity, doing it with class, getting up every day, doing the work. So I think he's just doing what he does, and I think it's a kind of incumbent upon all of us. Look, my mom's 88, still living on the farm, drives herself. Folks are able to do this, so I think this little bit of ageism that goes to this. But we can get out there, reach out, make the case, and for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
So now he goes from lying about the Biden-Harris administration to lying about the potential Harris-Walz administration, and of course his own background. Here he is lying about the impact of his choice to shut down schools during the Wuhan flu.
Would you have done the schools any differently? Because I think that's where a lot of parents are upset about what happened with the schools.
Well,
do you think you could have made any other choice?
Well, I think, just to be clear, over 80% of our students miss less than 10 days of in-class learning. The vast majority of students were in. It depended, again, on population density. Many of these decisions were being made by local folks to be able to do what was necessary to keep them there. I think, again, in hindsight, if we could have known that we would get vaccinations out as quickly as possible, we prioritized teachers and the staff in schools to get there. We're doing it differently now, and since May of 2021, almost every one of our students has been in the entire time and been doing that. So I think with hindsight as 2020, perhaps we could have tailored a little bit closer to that. But the fact of the matter is, making the case that we shouldn't have done anything is simply wrong.
This next one is low-hanging fruit and something that could be easily avoided if we didn't reward lying politicians with re-election or promotions. Simply put, Walz has lied repeatedly about his time in the military, including the extent of his service. His fellow Biden propagandist Pete Buttigieg defended this by claiming he only did it once and it was a slip-up.
Does Senator Vance have a point when he said that we should hear more from Governor Walz himself or even Vice President Harris to correct the record there?
No, he doesn't. And the fact that a veteran wants to go out and disparage another veteran just goes against certainly everything I learned during my time in service. Look, I think in many ways it's the exception that proves the rule. If the only thing that they can find about Tim Walz to complain about is to disparage his military record that was clearly honorable. Remember, you can retire at 20 years. Tim Walz served for 24. And the fact that they have to go back to find a clip from 2018 to find the one time that he slipped up when he talks about the weapons of war that he carried and said something instead about carrying a weapon in war, it's kind of an exception that proves the rule in terms of how hard you have to look to find Tim Walz saying anything that isn't precise and accurate.
Just one issue there, PD. He has done it over and over again. It's like these people forget that the internet is a thing, or they just don't care that we know they're lying.
I'm Tim Walz, and I'm running for Congress in Minnesota's 1st Congressional District. I'm a retired Command Sergeant Major.
And served 24 years in the National Guard, rising to Command Sergeant Major.
In the uniform which he proudly wore for over 2 decades, retiring as Command Sergeant Major.
We'll hear from Command Sergeant Major Tim Walz. I want him to know how much we all appreciate his service to our country, whether it's in the classroom or on the battlefield. Congressman Tim Murphy. Congressman Tim Walz of Minnesota. I was thinking of his state.
That's what happens when you're roommates. Might start looking alike. Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the leadership here. Thank you to my brother-in-arms, Patrick Murphy, who is also my roommate. And I'd like to say a special thank you to Chairman Lantos, who an awful lot of wisdom. And as we were speaking about the idea of a resolution or a non-binding resolution, the chairman was so eloquent.
Congressman Tim Walz, also a member of the Armed Services Committee and Veterans Affairs, Democrat of Minnesota, highest-ranking enlisted soldier ever to serve in Congress. Enlisted in the Army National Guard at 17 and retired 24 years later as Command Sergeant Major and served with his battalion at Operating Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan.
And we can make sure that those weapons of war that I carried in war is the only place where those weapons are at.
My name is Dave Thule. This is Travis Quinlan. We're both constituents and Iraq War vets. We're hoping to talk to someone about a photograph I have of Congressman Walz. Okay. Not sure if you have ever seen this picture before? Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, in it depicts 2004 Afghanistan veteran.
Right.
Congressman Walz is not an Afghanistan war veteran, is he?
He served in Italy as part of Operation Enduring Freedom.
Okay, but he didn't serve in Afghanistan, did he?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Hi, Rick. I'm Dave Thule. How you doing? Nice to meet you. There's a young lady in the other office that was helping us, but if you can, you guys want to come in and have a seat? Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, have a seat. I am Dave Thule. This is Travis Quinlan. We're both constituents, and we're both Iraq War vets. We served together with the Minnesota National Guard. So we're here on a veteran-related issue. I don't know if you are familiar with this picture at all. This was taken in 2004 here in Mankato, and it's actually been posted on the internet for quite some time, and nobody quite realized what it is. But in this picture, Congressman Walz here is holding a sign that says "Enduring Freedom Veterans for Care." So tell me what your understanding of his military background is.
Yeah, I understand that he was called up in support of it. Obviously, in support of that operation. That's how I've always understood it. And so the time that he, when he got called up, I guess I've always referred to it as, he was called up and served in support of Operation Enduring Freedom.
Okay, so is there any question in your mind what Enduring Freedom is?
No.
Okay, so I guess most people, and you yourself included, would associate Enduring Freedom with Afghanistan, right?
Right, but okay. I mean, I think it, as I also understand that it encompasses a great deal.
Well, Operation Enduring Freedom is limited to Afghanistan and the airspace directly above. There's other units that are called up in support of, and I'm sure that's probably what his military orders said.
Right.
My concern, other than this picture, is that the congressman's website, his official biography, says simply that he was mobilized with his battalion in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, without any other details. Don't you think it's reasonable people might assume that means he served in Afghanistan?
Perhaps, I guess.
Okay. So it's been 5 years now, or I guess almost 5 years, that the congressman's official biography has said he served in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. Isn't it reasonable, if it causes confusion, or it may cause confusion, that somebody may have thought to change that and explain that he served in Italy and not in Afghanistan?
I mean, what would you suggest it be changed to, I guess?
Simply to add the words "in Italy." Served in support of Operation Enduring Freedom in Italy. Simple as that, because then it specifies that he served in Italy. Now, don't get me wrong, I certainly appreciate the Congressman's service. 24 years in the National Guard, we're both National Guardsmen ourselves. We appreciate his service, and we appreciate his being deployed. But there's a huge difference between being deployed to a base in Italy and being in the combat zone in Afghanistan. Okay. Are you aware of any of the media reports from 2006 that inaccurately cited the Congressman as a war veteran?
Specifically, I can't think of any right now, but I don't. I would imagine that I know people have approached me as a staffer and thought that, and so I've corrected them. If you serve in support of an operation, you're not necessarily a veteran of that operation. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So your question is more about this picture than his biography.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
The biography is one of them. That's bad. That's misleading. That's a little bad. This right here, under current U.S. law, this could get the congressman probably thrown in jail in violation of the 2006 Stolen Valor Act, which says it is a crime, a federal crime, to portray yourself in writing or verbally as having received an award or decoration authorized by Congress that you didn't receive. Congressman Walz is clearly claiming in this sign, in this picture with this sign, to be an Enduring Freedom veteran. He is clearly, nobody disputes the fact that he is not an Afghanistan or Enduring Freedom veteran. So this represents a fairly serious issue. So can I leave you my name and number, and can I trust that someone will get back to me on this issue?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let me grab it. Dave, was it?
Yes.
How do you spell your last name?
Thule, T-H-U-L.
And you're from Owatonna, you said?
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to leave any of this?
Yes, I'm going to leave this for you. This is a copy of the picture, so you guys have exactly what I'm looking at. And this is a copy of the story that I'm working off of. I'm also a blogger, and so posted this. So I will leave you with all the information there that is relevant to this, and I'll leave you with a copy of the picture. And I will hope to hear from someone in the congressman's office, if not the congressman, because this is a fairly serious matter and it needs to be addressed.
Okay. And you posted this then? This is posted online?
Yes, it's posted on Monday.
Okay.
Naturally, after these lies came out, CNN had to run a segment accusing J.D. Vance of also misrepresenting his military career, which is obviously grasping at straws, but that doesn't mean they won't try.
I also think that J.D. Vance, as a messenger on this, may be an imperfect messenger, because we have, as you introduced him, as a combat correspondent, which was what his title was. But when you dig a little deeper into that, he was a public affairs specialist, someone who did not see combat, which certainly the title combat correspondent kind of gives you a different impression. So he may be the imperfect messenger on that.
And I've also seen the criticism. Just going to point out that I saw yesterday where you talked about combat correspondent. And that's important to me as well. And that's not just about J.D. Vance. That's about all of my Marines, but not just Marines. All combat correspondents, public affairs Marines, combat camera Marines, graphic artists, all of those Marines and other service members whose job it is to go where the action is, wherever that is, and to tell the story. And those people, there's a hall in our public affairs school called Defense Information School of 130 heroes that served in that capacity who did not make it out of a combat zone. So that's important to me as well. That's why I'm here today, to represent my Marine, J.D. Vance, represent his service, probably try to send a message to all veterans, stand on your record, it's enough, but also defend those of us whose job it is to tell that Marine Corps story and to go wherever that story is.
Well, here is Tim Walz, who enlisted when he was 17 years old. He served in the National Guard for 24 years. And I'm not aware of any military service that J.D. Vance has ever served. So let's just make the comparison there. And what happened in the tragedy of the killing of George Floyd and then the unrest. Yeah, okay, pardon me for that.
When he isn't lying about his military service, he is spending his time as governor, allowing cities to be destroyed. Walz was the governor of Minnesota in 2020 during the leftist/race riots. Not only did Walz allow these riots to get to the insane level that they did, he supported it in order to get brownie points from the base.
A society that does not put equity and inclusion at the center of it is certainly going to eventually come to the places where we're at. This is a moment of inflection. It's a moment of real change. It's a moment that those folks who are out there demanding this are not going to take a commission or a report. They're going to want fundamental change. And that is what I think, that's one of the exciting things in the midst of all this. You can feel a sense of optimism coming back. The murder of George Floyd shocked not just Minnesota nor the nation, it shocked the world. And the civil unrest that ensued from that was probably some of the greatest that we've seen both in this nation and globally. And that operation involving dozens of local, county, and then the state, involving multiple states in the region, and involving the federal government, had to be assembled, had to be coordinated, and had to make sure that we brought order back. I'll be the first to tell you, that's terrifying for Minnesotans in those days. Nothing like this had been seen before at the level of violence after the murder of George Floyd. I think, again, there'll be stories written, and this will be written about for quite some time. I'm proud of Minnesota's response.
We are seeing such damage and destruction throughout Minneapolis and St. Paul. Things have gotten so out of control, it is hard to understand.
It's been a chaotic, at times violent day in South Minneapolis, turning into a situation unlike anything we've ever seen in our community.
From Chopper 5 up above, we can see the plume of smoke drifting towards downtown Minneapolis.
Started vandalizing the building, shattering a window, spray painting squad cars.
We are asking the governor, we're asking Mayor Fry, what is the plan here?
We saw people throwing rocks at police cars, at the precinct building.
This has gotten so out of control, it is definitely not a safe situation for anyone.
The tragedy would be if one of these dumpster fires spreads to one of those big apartment buildings or some of these homes, and then you can't get a fire truck down the street.
Please, Governor Walz, Mayor Fry, explain to us what the plan is.
We've seen protesters attacking police, defacing buildings, and looting from businesses.
The place is completely trashed. A lot of stuff has been hauled out of there. Sadly, no police presence in that area whatsoever.
I'm just so baffled. If this is being in charge, this is not a good look.
There is oil, there are chemicals, there are paints, all sorts of things that are combustible and that could really cause a huge explosion.
People are scared, and people are angry, and people want to hear from their governor.
If the governor and the mayor are not going to take care of this problem, people will. People will uprise over this.
This is a fail. I mean, this is an abject failure. I just don't think there's any other way to put it. You know, like I said earlier, the house is on fire. Will you please tell us if the fire department's on its way? I mean, is anything going to happen here? We're just going to let this burn.
Sounds like you had a lot to be proud of there, Tim. In addition to helping rioters burn down towns in Minnesota because of a drug overdose, he was one of the worst tyrants during the open tyrant phase of COVID-19. This included the usual mandates and lockdowns, but additionally he set up a hotline for citizens to snitch on their neighbors if they dared to not follow the government's unconstitutional orders. Now keep these policies in mind when you hear what he is currently running around saying on the campaign trail.
Because in Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
Hello, you have reached the Department of Public Safety stay-at-home hotline. The information you leave is considered public information. At the tone, please leave the following information: your name, your callback number, how the stay-at-home order is being violated, and where the stay-at-home order was violated. Thank you.
And it's social gatherings with other households. Don't bring other households in. Don't bring, and this is, I have a big family. We do a lot of things together. That's not going to be possible. It's immediate family. We're going to stop in-person dining. The next ones are tough. Fitness centers and adult and youth sports. Receptions, private parties, and other celebrations, the same thing, and outdoor events and entertainment. Many of you are out of work. Businesses are shuttered. Families are struggling to pay rent. People are worried about making ends meet.
The new restrictions are a big blow to restaurants and bars.
It doesn't hit all businesses equally. It's like a tornado that went through and hit restaurants and left other buildings standing.
At the beginning of the pandemic, she was forced to close her small business for 3 months.
We're doing everything right. Why do we have to now worry about another closure again?
The president of Hospitality Minnesota tells us that restaurants and bars are affiliated with only 2% of COVID cases and should not be unfairly singled out.
We're not just randomly targeting these things. The data shows this is how COVID-19 works. The infection rates increase after a set time in the evening. I don't think you can ever set the date on this.
Not only did the governor not give a date for lifting restrictions, he also didn't give any metrics he's looking at to make a decision.
Get ready to see more and more bankruptcies declared in the month of June. There'll be a ton of them.
You may have heard Walz being referred to as Tampon Tim. This is because as governor, he forced schools to put tampons in the boys' bathrooms.
Requires Minnesota Public Schools to provide free period products, including tampons, in bathrooms regularly used by students in grades 4 through 12. It requires school districts to develop a plan to ensure all students who menstruate can access the products for free. While the vast majority of the period products will be used in the girls' bathrooms, the decision was made to structure the bill as gender inclusive in order to ensure that trans and non-binary students who menstruate would have equal access to the products they need.
That's about as much of Walz as I can take for now. Let's move on to JD Vance. Overall, the politics of Vance are going to line up with Trump for the most part. He is questioning money to Ukraine, but pro-money going to Israel. He talks about securing the border, mass deportations, and questions the results of the 2020 selection of Joe Biden. Other examples are he talks about limiting the power and scope of the intelligence agencies and reducing the amount of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. None of that should be a surprise given that he was Trump's pick, but what is surprising is that Vance was the choice given his previous comments about Trump.
Is former President Donald Trump America's Hitler? That's what his current vice presidential running mate questioned in 2016. Here's the text Senator Josh McLaurin says is from JD Vance, which reads, quote, I go back and forth between thinking Trump is a cynical expletive like Nixon, who wouldn't be that bad and might even prove useful, or that he's America's Hitler. This text from 2016, the same year Vance went on the Charlie Rose show and said this.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
So what's changed? We reached out to Vance's team for answers. They did not respond. But in 2022, former President Trump, seemingly unfazed by Vance's characterization of him, said Vance just didn't know him.
He said some bad things about me, but that was before he knew me, and then he fell in love.
We're going to ask each of you about your views on former President Trump. But Mr. Vance, we do begin with you. You've admitted you've changed your mind on Donald Trump, but in the past you've said, quote, I'm a never Trump guy, quote, my God, what an idiot, and quote, God wants better of us. All statements you have either said or tweeted about Donald Trump at some point. The question, you have 60 seconds. Why should Trump voters, Trump supporters, vote for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, all of us say stupid things, and I happen to say stupid things very publicly. I've been very public about the fact that I voted for the president in 2020, that I was wrong about the president back in 2015, 2016, and that he's been the greatest president of my lifetime for the very simple reason, there are many, but one very important reason is that he revealed the corruption in Washington, D.C. I mean, who would have believed 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that the FBI would actually investigate illegally, get an illegal wiretap on a sitting U.S. presidential candidate. We saw that. Trump revealed it, and he revealed it in a way that showed us the stakes of the fight, which is why I'm running for this office in the first place. One thing I'd point out is that I was just north of 30 years old when I said a lot of those things. A lot's changed in my life. I re-engaged with my faith. I got baptized 3 years ago. I've had 3 kids since then. A lot's different. And one of the things that's different is that I did change my mind about Donald Trump. He was a great president. And I think at the end of the day, one of the things this race presents is an opportunity. Who actually agrees with Trump on the core issues of trade, of immigration? Who's willing to fight for an America First foreign policy? I think that's clearly me.
His comments on the debate stage definitely come off like backtracking because your political career depends on it, but you might see it differently. To be clear, I am not saying you can't criticize Trump if you're a Republican or that you can't change your mind about someone in the political world, but it is a weird look to say someone could potentially be America's Hitler and then run on the ticket with him years later. More importantly, I think it's also a sign that Trump is still terrible at choosing people to surround himself with, because if someone said I could potentially be America's Hitler, I would definitely not be including them in my inner circle regardless of their recent supposed 180. Of course, this is not the only thing that has been brought up from past comments with Vance. He was hit hard in the media over his comments about childless cat ladies. I have no problem with his comments. If you want to make fun of or make a point about childless cat ladies, go for it. But his response to the criticism has been to say that the media is lying about his comments. On that note, here are a few different occasions he is discussing the topic.
Right, there are just these basic cadences of life
that I think are really powerful and really, really valuable when you have kids in your life. And the fact that so many people, especially in America's leadership class, just don't have that in their lives, I worry that it makes people more sociopathic and ultimately our whole country a little bit less less mentally stable. And of course, you talk about going on Twitter. Final point I'll make is you go on Twitter, and almost always the people who are most deranged and most psychotic are people who don't have kids at home.
J.D. Vance made a pretty obvious point. He said the childless left, that's how he put it, lacks, quote, physical commitment to the future of this country. Quote, why is this just a normal fact of life for the leaders of our country to be people who don't have a personal and direct stake in it via their own offspring? That's what he asked, and they went completely bananas. So we thought it'd be interesting to talk to J.D. Vance about what he meant and what it's like to be attacked for saying things that are so obviously true. He joins us tonight. J.D. Vance, thanks so much for coming on. So tell us that was just a very short snippet of a much longer speech, and really interesting speech that people, I think, should read. But what were you saying?
Thanks, Tucker. And by the way, if folks want to help us out, jdvance.com. Every little bit helps if you can throw us a couple bucks. But look, what I was basically saying is that we're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made. And so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it? I just wanted to ask that question and propose that maybe if we want a healthy ruling class in this country, we should invest more, we should vote more, we should support more people who actually have kids, because those are the people who ultimately have a more direct stake in the future of this country. If you think about the modern Democrat Party, not the older guys, the Clintons, the Bernie Sanders, the Joe Bidens, but think about Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, all of these people. It's like a party where the next generation of leaders, none of them have kids, right? And look, like I understand some people don't have kids. There are health reasons. There are other reasons people don't have kids. But the entire Democrat Party is like this childless cabal of people who don't really care about the future. And when you call that out, they get so alienated and they get so angry at you that they just start throwing words like racist around. And I think that's what's really going on. I was looking at the leaders of the Democrats and realized how many of the next-gen leaders of the Democrats, it's Kamala Harris, it's AOC, it's a lot of folks like that, they're not planning to have kids. They don't have kids. And I noticed that, not having children, I think, changes the way you think about the future of the country. If you don't have skin in the game, you pointed to some of the studies that suggest that parents think about the future of the country in a different way. And I realized that we're being ruled by a childless elite. And it's not just they don't have kids. Of course, a lot of people don't have kids for different reasons. It's that they're proud of the fact they don't have kids. They think it's bad if you have kids. They think it's bad for the environment. They're proud of their abortions. They shout their abortions from the rooftops. We're entering a new era where the leaders of the left are not just without kids. They're proud of that fact, and they look down on people who invest their time and their future in their children. And that is a dangerous place to live as a country.
JD, so I'm curious. I take a different stance, a little bit different than you and Steve, respectfully. There are about a quarter of the population that chooses not to have kids. These are perhaps some of the hardest working, most career-driven people that you'll find. Are we not painting this group with perhaps a broad brush? Because not everybody is of that mentality that, I'm not doing it because of climate change. Some people just choose a little bit differently. And should those people not be excluded because perhaps society's changing a little bit? Perhaps people are seeing the American dream as, focusing on their careers. What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I've got people in my own family who haven't had kids for various reasons. Of course, I've got dear friends who haven't had kids. But I think it's one thing to say that some people are going to choose not to have children, and another thing to say that we're living in a country where having children is now looked down upon. And I think that's really where we have to focus our attention. Look, you do not have a future as a country unless you have the next generation, unless you have babies, unless you have viable, healthy families. And I think so much of what's going on in the left, especially, is that they've become obsessed with this idea that having a kid is like an old-fashioned thing. It's something the previous generations did. Look, if people don't want to have kids, that's their choice, but we shouldn't turn it into a lifestyle brand, and we shouldn't point our finger at those Hicks in Middle America who have children.
Because people are calling me who very much would like to support you
and President Trump. Dr. Connie Rice does not have children, neither does my friend, your colleague, Tim Scott. George Washington did not have biological children, and neither did James Madison. So I think you will agree with me that direct offspring are not necessary to be fully invested in the future of this country.
Of course not, Trey. I do think that being a parent actually has a profound effect on somebody's perspective, and we should honor and respect that. But there are a whole host of people who don't have children for a whole host of reasons, and they certainly are great people who can participate fully in the life of this country. And that's not what I said, Trey. If you look at what the left has done, they have radically taken this out of context and, in fact, aggressively lied about what I've said. What I do think is true, Trey, and this goes to the heart of what I was talking about 3 years ago in those comments, but it's going to be something I continue to talk about, is that the left has increasingly become explicitly anti-child and anti-family.
This is just an opinion from Vance, not a big deal either way. It's an opinion I agree with in regards to the leftist position on family and children. However, it's pretty clear that he said what he said, and using the out of context excuse because it's an election year doesn't really hold water. As I mentioned at the start of the video, Vance and Walz are just running mates and they're not the main attraction, but hopefully this video gives you an idea of some of the topics that will be brought up when the two debate on October 1st. Thanks for watching, and remember, the next time the media are talking about how popular the Harris ticket is, Kamala Harris has won the same number of presidential primary races that you have.
0.